was an absolute honor to be able to sit here with Dr. Sayed and him speaking about the great work that he's done. Before we conclude, and before Laura runs away, I'm going to call Laura up on stage before she runs away. And in order to do so, I'm also going to call up Ali to come up on the stage, and Hunter Milborn as well, if you could please come up on the stage. We were going to do this later, but Laura has an immediate flight to catch, so no worries.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, I apologize, but I've got 2 little kids at home that need me.
So we're presenting you with an appreciation award. Thank you very much for coming today. Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you. Now, in order to introduce our next speaker, I would like to first introduce his company, the MILBORNE Group, with almost 40 years of experience. More, 40 plus years of experience, and over $27 billion in sales. More than 27 billions in sales. He's really created a brand for himself in the GTA condominium community, and I think people call him affectionately Dean of Condos. So please help me welcome Mr. Hunter Milborn.
Thank you. And I'd like to congratulate all the other speakers that went before me and Ali for a very well executed day and very informative. I mean, the doctor's speech and Laura, I mean, how many people enjoyed that? Another hand for them. So, when I chatted with Ali about what we were going to talk about today, our field is real estate marketing. And the very first building that we ever sold was built. And after that, we probably sold another 750 buildings that weren't built, that weren't even started. So we really had to market because we really didn't have any product yet. And most of the delivery dates on those buildings were anywhere from 3 to 5 years out. You know, we're kind of blessed in Toronto that we have a very ethnically diverse and tolerant and friendly community that loves to buy real estate. And because of the Greenbelt legislation that came into the province in 2005, the supply of single-family homes was really quite choked off. And what that did was it made condominiums the market that really became the affordable source of condominiums. So I'm going to give you a brief history of time, not like Stephen Hawking, but just about the Toronto condominium market. And I think hopefully it'll be insightful, a little bit of innovation, a little bit of marketing things that we did over the years. So 70s, 80s, 90s, right up till today. And I think you may be somewhat surprised. How many people in the room born after 1976? Okay, quite a few. So that was the year we started our business, and there was a building downtown called 33 Harbor Square. It was built by an Ottawa developer. It was built in 1974. It was built as a rental. It had 540 units in it, and after 2 years, they'd only rented 150. So it was kind of a failure. It didn't rent. There was headlines in the newspapers, mistake on the lake, big problems. So they finally decided that they were going to convert it to condominiums, and another year went by and they'd only sold another 100. So it was still a little more than half sold when we took it over, and it was really a big problem. And in those days, it may be hard for everybody to visualize today, but the Toronto waterfront at the foot of Bay Street, where this project was, Harbour Castle Hotel, Harbour Square Apartments, to the east and to the west, there wasn't anything except warehouses and ports, and it was all industrial. And it wasn't that long ago. And condominium legislation had only come into force in 1967 in Ontario, 1966 in British Columbia, so it was a relatively new industry. And so we did what and there wasn't much local talent in terms of doing that. So we actually decided to hire a Madison Avenue advertising agency to help us with the marketing and selling. And the decision that they made was that don't focus on the apartments, focus on the amenities. And this was really kind of the beginning of what we call today lifestyle marketing, which everybody takes for granted. But there was a little indoor connection to the hotel from the apartments. And when that hotel was built, it was almost 1,000 rooms. It was a big hotel. And for the first 6 years, they didn't even open the second tower, even though it was finished, because there was no demand. So it was pretty isolated and pretty bleak down there for many years. But the building also had 3 guest suites that you could put up. So the whole focus of the marketing and advertising campaign came with respect to not the apartments or the kitchens or the bathrooms or the sort of hardware, but kind of the software. You know, what was the lifestyle like? And it was this passerelle, it was the guest suites. There was an ad that they created, it said that fish and visitors smell in 3 days unless you have the option of putting them up in a luxurious guest suite in your own building. So there was a lot of creative things that happened like that. And a lot of you would be surprised to know that the average price, like their metric today when people talk about condominiums, it's price per square foot. How much per square foot is that unit? And I know there's a lot of realtors here. So in those days, the average price per square foot of that community was $60. So in 1976, not that long ago. So, you know, then the second building that we started to pre-sell was called Market Square. And it was over a church in front. And by this time, you know, it was like $80 a square foot. So I think one of the most important lessons that I learned over the years is that if you think of the price today, and if you think of the price tomorrow, it always seems expensive today. And it always seems better if you look back. But if you fast forward a couple of years, tomorrow's price makes today's price look inexpensive. You know, today the average price in Yorkville for a mid-market condo is $1,700 to $1,800 a square foot, and the high-end condos are well over $2,000. So then in the 80s there was an article that was done in Canadian Business, and my major competitor at the time was a guy who was a little more of a hardcore salesperson and, you know, kind of a closer type. And we always took a kind of an analytical approach. And where the dean of condominiums came was when they wrote this article and they said, here's MILBORNE, and his style was somewhat analytical, somewhat objective and research oriented. And the other guy was a little more rah, and, you know, dump everybody in a room, and nobody likes to buy real estate in an empty room. So they asked each of us for a quote about each other for the end of the article. So his quote was, I don't want to be a genius, I just want to make money. And a testimony to some of the other things, if your motivation is only money, maybe that's not the best goal. And he was kind of the king, so they referred to him as the king, and later me as the dean, because I guess we had this more academic approach. So my quote was that kings get deposed and deans get tenure. So, and that's sort of what ended up. So, you know, the other thing was that we get into the 90s, there was a project in Vancouver that we sold. It was the BC Hydro building. So this was one other building, I guess which actually was up, but there was a large Schedule A Canadian bank that had loaned on this building, and in the early 90s, as many would remember, there was a deep recession in Canada. So the mandate of this bank, who was the client, was how do we lose 20 million, not 50 million? And the way to do that was to take this empty office building and turn it into a residential condo. But what they did was they gave us a target and they gave us a deadline, because most of the other 750 odd buildings that we sold, either before or after, didn't have a deadline. It was like, let's do our best, let's get 75% sold so we can get a construction loan and start building and start financing. But this one, what they said to us was, we're going to give you a budget of $2 million, and we're going to give you 120 days, and if you're not 90% sold, it's over. So we said, okay, fine, So we didn't kind of set it up to hit a single or a double or a triple. We said, well, look, we have to hit it out of the park. We have to do a home run. So what happened was that a couple of weeks before the end of the 120 days, we opened a fabulous sales center, and we had 10,000 people lined up around the block that waited, and the building opened for sale at 10 a.m. and by 2 p.m. that Saturday afternoon it was sold out. There's a right of rescission in there, so we started to take backup offers. We took backup offers on every suite. So what happened was that building sold out in 2 days, and it sold out for higher than they was, so it actually lost a little bit less than 20 million. But I think the lesson that we learned on that was that if you set a high bar and set a high goal, you can achieve a lot more. And you know, it's funny because we've tried to replicate that situation in other things, but we never quite got to the same level of performance there. And I think it was because whatever deadlines we gave ourselves or whatever deadlines the developer gave us were kind of self-imposed and somewhat artificial. But with this one, when the bank spoke, you know, we knew that those deadlines were real. If you get into today's world, Toronto today, in the last 4 or 5 years, there are between 25,000 and 40,000 pre-construction sales per year. So not counting any existing product resales. And we've been fortunate enough to be able to sell sort of in the range of 17 to 22% of that volume each year. So it's really a lot more, significantly more than most other North American and European cities. So CMHC came out with a study not so long ago and said that the city needs 50 to 55,000 homes per year to stay balanced in the market. And I think if people are wondering why that prices are going up, that, you know, it's really an imbalance of the supply and demand. I mean, I think the press and the politicians would lead us to believe that it's foreign buyers that are driving prices up, and that may be true somewhat in Vancouver, but in Toronto, you know, it's really just that imbalance between supply and demand, and the bureaucracy of getting things approved. You know, someone said to me recently, to open a restaurant in Toronto, you need 27 different permits. And in order to get some of them, you have to pre-apply the other ones. So someone said, well, why can't you have a blockchain that lets you fill out all the forms all at once and let you process through that timing process simultaneously? So I think that, you know, we've tried to innovate. There, I guess we've always separated the innovation into 2 categories. The process, call it the software type of innovations, where, you know, we used to have a legal document that was 20 pages and someone would have to flip through the whole 20 pages and sign at the back, and they were just worn out and paranoid by the time they got to the end. So I said, well, why don't we just have the signature page at the front and make everything else a schedule? It's all one-sided mumbo jumbo by the, you know, on the boilerplate form anyway, but people felt a lot better just signing one page and having schedules at the back. You know, we innovated in terms of inventory control, we innovated in terms of the realtor distribution, and we created different groups of realtors, platinum realtors, VIP realtors. So we really innovated in terms of how we released product. And keep in mind, this is out of a sales center, in most cases no building yet. So I think that, you know, one of the future things I think you're going to see in Toronto is that if you look at places like Hong Kong or Singapore, CIBC came out with a study a few years ago, and they said that the most expensive real estate in the world are the islands. Singapore, Hong Kong, Manhattan. And they said because the province created this green belt, so they froze over 1,600,000 acres around the GTA, around the Golden Horseshoe, which effectively cut off the supply of single-family and low-rise townhomes. So that effectively made Toronto an island. So a lot of the bank economists, when they talk, they think that, you know, if you think it's expensive now, just wait. And I think one of the other things that's happening now is that we're going to be in for a lot more innovation. I mean, one of the themes here was not just change, but accelerating change, change happening much faster. Because in the construction side and the process side, there haven't been a lot of changes, that we've noticed in the last years about the construction methods. But one of the clients that we took over, and back to Laura's theme, is that Google sold itself to a new company called Alphabet. And Alphabet created a new subsidiary called Sidewalk Labs. So there isn't going to be a Google housing development, and Google's not becoming a developer, it's Sidewalk Labs. So Sidewalk Labs acquired a site of 12 acres at Parliament and Queen's Quay that we got a mandate on, and we've been working with them on the planning stage. So they're about to start in the next few years, probably a year and a half from now in terms of the sales. We're in the planning stages now. 5 towers. It'll be mixed use, retail, office, residential. And there, I can tell you that there's going to be a lot of innovations in terms of the construction methodology, and most of it's public knowledge. They're talking about timber construction. They can actually make wood structure that's more fire resistant and stronger than concrete. And because you can replant trees, it's much more sustainable. It doesn't have the same carbon footprint that a concrete building would have. It shortens the construction period to make it more affordable. So I think that we're going to see a lot of innovations in the future, and we're very excited about that. So again, I'd like to thank Ali and everyone who was involved in the planning of this event, and we look forward to some interesting panel discussions in a while. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hunter, for those valuable words of advice. I'm just going to turn your attention back to the screen. With regards to the MILBORNE Group, there's a very short snippet of a video about their organization, about the work that he does. So again, please pay attention to the stage, because the video will begin. There we go.
We are marketer of urban master plan multi-phase communities. Our breadth of experience covers every facet of the new condominium marketplace. Although we have positioned and successfully sold boutique buildings, townhomes, and resort properties, our previous experience lies in the promotion and sales of mixed-use high-rise communities that change neighborhoods, waterfronts, and cityscapes. We cover every aspect of development. The MILBORNE method. We believe the most direct route to success is a collaborative effort between our team and our client. Our proprietary process merges innovative market analysis, exhaustive research, and real-time insight with our client's product, vision, and plan to generate maximum exposure and to impact with minimal expense. Hunter MILBORNE is nationally recognized as the Dean of Condos by Canadian Business Magazine. Through his firm, MILBORNE Real Estate, Mr. MILBORNE has been personally responsible for the marketing and sales of over $25 billion in properties, having sold over 100,000 units.
Now going to divert